hello and welcome at True Alignment. We have a blog, a podcast. Now we have a webinar series. Our goal through the quantum alignment webinars is to communicate with you, business leaders, innovators, executives, and to help you scale and grow your business, improve your performance, and of course, create better work cultures. Through this series of webinars, what we're doing is sharing some thinking from CEOs and leaders and their experiences to help better inform you and so that you can see all the different aspects of business coming together in true alignment, allowing you to achieve greater levels of success. Hi, I'm Edgar Papke, the founder of True Alignment. Welcome to the Quantum Alignment webinar series. Quantum refers to how everything is aligned, and everything is actually in some form or another entangled and intertwined and interdependent on each other. Our goal of each of these is to communicate with you business leaders, innovators, and executives, and to help you scale and grow your businesses, improve your performance, and create more productive work cultures in a climate that, quite frankly, is anything but easy. So we all know business success hinges on the ability to foster innovation and change. And the key there is to embrace change and make it work for us, not against us. As business leaders, we need to inspire adaptability and synergies in ways that improve performance, outcomes, and most importantly, our cultures, the cultures of our organizations and teams. What's essential? What's the essential driver for adapting to and succeeding through these changes and to create high-performing cultures? Quite simply, it's alignment. We work on all things alignment at True Alignment, alignment at the intersections of our personal and professional lives, alignment in our communities and our organizations, and in our businesses and society. And of course, ultimately, alignment to ourselves, the ongoing tension and process that we all engage in throughout our lives. But finding alignment to ourselves is to find ourselves at a place of self-acceptance and at our highest levels of performance. So in this session of quantum alignment, in this webinar series, this one is titled The Impact of Misalignment on Employee Attraction and Engagement. Engagement in our workforce right now is one of the key topics that are at the top of the list of so many CEOs and leaders. The idea of aligning around our mission, our purpose, our vision, our strategies, and of course, personal alignment to a set of personal goals that are fulfilling and contribute to the organization and to the success of the business. Today, we'll delve into the profound influence of alignment and at times the lack thereof on your team and organizational success. We'll discover how misalignment can impede employee attraction and engagement, affecting productivity, innovation, and ultimately your bottom line. So we've got a couple of great guests with us today, Pinakin, Petal, and Scott Tibbitts. And through real-world examples and expert analysis provided by Pinakin and Scott, we'll explore strategies to foster alignment in all levels of our organizations, empowering you to cultivate a culture where every individual's contribution is maximized. So let's get started and talk about some fundamental pieces and begin with the transformative journeys that our two guests have taken in business. I can attest to, in my experience of working with both Pinakin and Scott, that they've been able to kind of crack the code of what it takes to create engaged cultures and to create high performance throughout. So thank you so much for joining us, Scott. Pinakin, thanks very much.
Pleasure. Thanks, Edgar. Thanks for having
me. And Scotty, I call you Scotty, so now we're already
Scotty works best.
Yeah, thank you. And Scotty, you've just released a book about your adventures from Garage to Mars, which is just really a wonderful, wonderful read about how exciting the role and the ups and downs of a life of an entrepreneur.
Yeah, but thanks. Quite the process, Edgar. And somebody once said to me, everybody should write a book, whether you publish it or not. And now I understand why. Just the whole process of codifying something that's important to you is an extraordinary personal experience. And then to have that be out there and have people come back and say they appreciated having that, hearing that story, adds to it all. So thanks. That'll I'll be I'll be speaking to this from that as we go on.
Yeah. And Pinakin, you've had just incredible success in your marketplace. Yeah, if you could just share a little bit of your growth over the last few years and where you're heading.
Thank you as well, Edgar, for having me on. Good morning to you and the audience. Yeah, I think we've had tremendous growth over the last 7 years. I believe we've been 12 times year over year growth, right? And starting from a place from zero and to where we are now in 12 years, we've grown to about a $200 million organization. And I think, as you well know, going through that alignment piece and getting the right revenue in has been key to our growth, as well as the continued success that we've had.
And everyone, just as a quick reminder, your questions, thoughts, comments, anything at all are welcome. We have Heather Kuhar with us today to help moderate your questions as they come in. So yeah, hi, Heather. So let me begin with a really basic question. When you think about employee engagement, right, and what the meaning of that, what thoughts come to mind in terms of how alignment affects engagement, and both in a positive and, of course, in a negative way?
I could start. My first thought right away, Edgar, is meet people where they are, right, and understand the situation prior to engaging is my first thought. But I think now I know a little bit better as well to have gotten through the true alignment pieces and the framework. And more importantly, as an organizational, make sure that we're adopting a mindset before taking on a framework like alignment or anything else. And that mindset starts building that brand and so on and so forth, right? So there's the various elements of it. But to be frank, my first thought on alignment is meet people where they are.
Okay.
And then it's our job to make sure we've got the right folks on and so on and so forth ahead of time.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's easily said, let's get the right people on the bus.
That's right.
I guess you really have to define what your bus looks like to be able to attract the right people to it,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
What are your
Before
thoughts?
You can meet them at their seat, you got to make sure you're getting the right people on, so on and so forth. But yes.
Yeah.
When you say get the right people on the bus, I don't know if you remember Ken Casey. He had a bus that was called Further, and filled with psychedelics and psychedelic pictures. He drove it across the country, and very clearly, nobody got on that bus unless they were aligned with the message. And he made that message so clear that it polarized. It created alignment, or I don't want to have anything to do with that. And that does remind us, with unintentionally, what we did with our company. We were a space company, and we were all about fun. Let's have fun, let's play, and let's be connected, and let's be transparent. And here we're kind of a touchy-feely space company. And we were the third leg of the stool is we really did good space hardware. We were excellent in what we did. And we were so transparent and proud of who we are that it was displayed throughout the company in a way that you probably couldn't be in Starsis for more than a minute before you picked up on this very different way of being. And in retrospect, that created alignment, because if you were a customer and you walked in and didn't want to have to do with that, you kind of turned around and left. And the same thing with talent. And so the people that we ended up working with ended up being highly aligned with our values, because they were both unusual and very apparent. And it created a way to filter and create alignment in the team without us ever realizing we were doing that, because we were so blah, ta-da, with who we were.
Yeah, I think there's a good point in that. My thoughts that come immediately to mind in how you're describing that. The first piece is, the fun and transparency link, and then linking that further to engagement. Because let's face it, when we're having fun, it's when we're working fearlessly. We don't have the tensions of misalignment, or am I in the right place, and what is my trust of the person that and the people I'm working with. So our state of fun is actually, when you think about transparency and fun, it's about not having fear and having that fear get in the way. And I think that's so important, especially when it comes to engagement, because quiet quitting, whatever it is, It's I don't like what's going on. But internally, I'm carrying a fear that the reason I don't like it because I'm not being satisfied. I'm not
Yeah.
happy with what I'm doing. That's a really good point and a great insight.
Well,
Yeah.
building on that a bit, you think of two phrases that we're all familiar with: imposter syndrome, smartest guy in the room, or smartest person in the room.
Uh-huh.
And both of those, man, when you're playing,
Yeah.
there's king of the mountain. All right. But
Right.
you're just joking with that, and there's not a lot of room for imposter syndrome in a company that's highly transparent. No, nor is there room for smartest person in the room. You'll just get laughed at and somebody will pull your pants down, I mean, literally.
Well, yeah,
um,
I think of the effort and the underlying fear of not being smart enough is that follows us all through life, right? Am
yeah.
I confident? Am I smart enough? Hey, Pinakin, when Scott mentioned that, a really big grin showed up on your face.
Yeah, I think I think those are some of the misalignments that are some of the cues that you'll be able to see within the organization as you're trying to stand things up, right? That's why it's set up, right? Within our firm, we're trying to make sure that the best idea survives, not where it's coming from, right? So
Yeah.
constantly we're evaluating that, we're turning that at every sort of level, from our teams to our organization at the corporate side. But yeah, I think that's the biggest reason I grinned. Often early on, because so many companies are founder led. They
Yeah.
they go down to that spot and say, "Oh, we need to get this person, that person," and all of a sudden you're accumulating really smart, talented folks. But when they're not aligned, or they're not aligned to the organization or where you're trying to go,
Yeah.
ultimately it starts seeming like, oh, well, it's this person or that person. When in essence, it's where the organization is and the alignment of all those folks themselves. But yeah, that's the biggest reason I was grinning, Edgar.
A question for you, Pinakin.
Yes,
As you've
sir.
gone through, extraordinary growth, and I know you've wrestled with moments of misalignment with individuals or parts of the company. How do you correct that ship? I know it's not simple. I mean, how do you create alignment when you're feeling misalignment?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about that this morning, Scott, and just replaying some of those moments. And I think there's definitely inflection points that we start getting to, and you start understanding, as an organization, things aren't going as well as you had hoped or well as you assumed. Um, and then you start making the hard decisions.
Yeah.
And start going through some of those hard decisions. And I think what's assisted in making those hard decisions for me personally the best is operating at a place of neutrality, right? And start thinking more of, hey, how can I be neutral about the decision I'm making before I'm even making it? A lot of times we make a decision before it's been made in our heads, right? Oh, this is the
Yeah.
right path to take. That's the right path to take based on some preconceived notion. But if you can get to a point where you're operating neutrality and taking in um, multiple views of looking at things, and then saying, okay, what's the best decision? That is
Yeah.
the hardest piece, right? And I think more and more I've been thinking about it, where I've seen it be successful is when we've, or I as an organization, and we as an organization has been able to do that.
I think there's some great pieces here. Um, One is going back to what you were talking about, Scott, is the whole idea of um, we call it through the research we discovered that this is the pull factor. In other words,
Oh,
engagement occurs when you create the space for that engagement, and then you tie that in with Pinakin's, which is a sense of neutrality. We're all going to advocate points of view, and as leaders, we pretty much hold the pen or the microphone for our point of
yeah.
view. So to come at it that way. The other thing in our research around engagement and what makes innovation in organizations work is this idea of confronting misalignment, curious confrontation, which is
Yeah.
a state of neutrality of curiosity that you address misalignment. And the misalignments are easy to spot. We all know that because all we have to do is look for the conflicts. Every
Yeah.
conflict is a misalignment. Therefore, every conflict and misalignment, it's an opportunity to create alignment. I think it's so important to come at it that way. and appreciate so much what both of you are saying about that. One is, how do you create the space? Because people across we talk so much about generationally about engagement and what people want. At the end of the day, if there's a conflict, that means that somebody needs to be heard, somebody needs to
Yeah.
be listened, and that neutral point of view that you're coming in with, having that neutral point of view that you're talking about, Pinakin, becomes so important, especially coming from the place where you're at, leaders and other leaders in the organization realizing that. Yeah. So Heather, I think you were trying to come in with a question that you've got for us.
I do. It was a great conversation, so I didn't want to interrupt, so I tried raising my hand. So we have a question from the group, and it's, I love the concept of working fearlessly. Everyone's fear tolerance is different. How do you best manage that?
Oh,
Ooh,
nice one.
that's a provocative question.
Yeah.
Edgar,
So,
can I start with something? I'm sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead,
please
Scott.
do, because I'm trying to,
To go back to, the alignment piece of things, Edgar, I think the biggest thing we've learned is building trust, right? And to do that, like you said, we need to make sure that we're removing fears and I think in order to do that, what we've been able to do is just spend a lot of time together, and go back to more on that personal level. Again, all business is personal, right? I've learned that from a great mentor I have, and everything is personal. And starting from that piece of that me model of, hey, these are the things how I'm based. These are things that I'm afraid of personally. And then exposing some of those at the right moments with the right people and building that trust within the organization. That's what's led us to where we are. Now, what makes it really hard is taking that from the executive team to that next level and making it more from an organizational perspective and establishing that as an organizational rather than a personal level. And I think that's the journey we're on now. And the way we're trying to attack that is really with, again, right, coming at it from a mindset perspective and then attaching frameworks to it. So for example, our mindset that we've adopted is a growth mindset, incremental innovations, a lot of what's gotten and you have talked about on the podcast before is sort of the mindset that we've adopted as an organization. Taking that mindset and attaching the true alignment framework to it, and then coming up with approaches to make it a systematic from an organizational perspective. But I think before all of that, it's got to tie all the way back to you as a person and some of the fears you have and being able to build on a team. So very hard question to answer.
Yeah.
Just because of the intricacies required.
Scotty, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is, I don't know if it addresses it directly, but it's certainly tangential. We had a lot of people with trust. When people come in an organization, especially if you have a large ta-da mission or vision or values, there's a, yeah, right, we'll see what this is really like. And there's a crossed arm sort of walking into it for a fair amount of people. Like there's too many people hugging here. You're not going to catch me doing that stuff, that kind of thing. And we did this thing, we kind of fell into it called a gripe box. And the whole point of it was to try to really put the CEO in a tough position by coming up with a gripe that really caused the CEO to kind of squirm because of its truth. It wasn't about blasting. It was about presenting a truth that would make the CEO squirm. And so what we did to forward that was to read them out loud, somewhat extemporaneously in front of the company, and really answer these questions from, what we thought were our core values. And so we had this game going, which is, okay, Scotty, let's hear you answer this one. We think you're paid too much. You say that this is an equal, a meritocracy, and yet we heard your salary is this. Help us understand why you should be paid that much more than we are. And that would be kind of a question I'd get, and it'd be phrased somewhat almost that edgily. And then I'd be forced or given the opportunity to extemporaneously and transparently communicate that about how, well, here's what CEOs get and why, and here's where I am, and I think that's reasonable, or other people do, and the board decides it. And that really created a lot of trust in the company that we walk the talk. This isn't just hooey. And then you'd start people see uncrossing. Next thing you know, they're hugging somebody or shaking hands in the hallway. And then the alignment happened as we worked through those trust issues by just being genuine, transparent, trying to stick to what we said we were.
Yeah, I think it's so important in what both of you just shared there. A couple of pieces. One is this idea of trust, because like you said, everybody kind of walks in and it's kind of tight, and because trust hasn't yet developed, and we know from a human nature standpoint that trust shows up in different ways. One, I trust you're going to listen to me and not ignore me. I trust that you'll help me succeed and help me achieve. And then there's the one about transparency and openness, and to be able to be trusting in that openness, I think is certainly, as far as I can tell, is typically the pinnacle. Are you really going to be honest with me as a leader, or is there honesty through the organization? Is there openness through the organization? That idea of listening to the questions, I think, is I would suggest is somewhat profound in a way. And here's why: because most of the time when we speak of intimacy and vulnerability, we talk about extending it and speaking to others. Here's who I am. Here's my vulnerability. I'm going to be intimate with you because I'm going to share truth about myself, what I think, see, and feel, who I am. And I find it, and this is particularly true for leaders, so good on you for being open to the questions, because the other side of vulnerability is hearing, is listening, is hearing the question. I find that vulnerability in listening is more difficult and challenging, and just as, if even more powerful than the sharing part. And the reason I say that is because when we achieve vulnerability in our listening, when we have openness in our listening, that's the invitation. And then people begin to trust. Because I think that invitation has to occur, and it has to be one that people will have a mindset based on their experience. Behaviors don't change until the experience changes. Mindset doesn't change until the emotional aspect of an experience shifts. So I think you're right on target with that. That's I can't I don't know if all the people on the webinar have experienced something, that kind of communication at that level that says, you can ask me anything, here you go. But let's do that. And to be vulnerable to that, to hearing it in a vulnerable way and then responding to it, that's quite powerful. Yeah.
As you say that, what it meant is we had to make sure that everything we were doing within the company, our financials, our salaries, everything, not that we would expose it, but we would be able to, if we had to, be able to explain in a transparency way why it was. So it created a glass house feeling of, we have to make sure all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed, because we might be looking into some part of the company far deeper than we ever imagined. So we better have our house in order, to your point, with a line that it's lined.
And I think, Scott, what that allows you to do, and being able to share that amongst the team, right, allows you to explore, as we're saying, various options or various things, right? When you're not open, when you're, hey, we've got to worry about this information from that person or this information from that person, you're taking yourself out of situations and not being able to explore, and again, right, not looking at everything and say, okay, this is the best decision, not operating out of place of neutrality. So yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and we actually have a term for that in the true alignment system. We call fearless exploration. I will fearlessly hear and listen to you and explore through curiosity in what it is you're seeking. Yeah. So I'm Heather. You go ahead, please. Thank you for your patience.
The conversation is engaging and sparking some questions from the group. So this question starts: would like to incentivize an employee that needs to deliver more enthusiasm and extra effort for our mission. He does his job and cannot work additional hours due to personal constraints. Do people work harder / better for bonuses, or is there a better way? How do I approach the person with the challenge? We are a nonprofit land trust, and my personal experience is putting in significant extra hours to accomplish our goals.
Yeah, I'm just going to tap in real quickly, and then Pinakin and Scott, I'd like to hear from you on thoughts on this one. Nice problem to need to solve. There's first of all, not for profits. People are there for they're there because of the initiative and the intrinsic value of what's being done. And so people can put a lot of effort into it and not expect a lot in return at times. And yet at some point, just like being a caretaker, it catches up with you and then you need something. And I'd like to just point out that terms like enthusiasm, showing more enthusiasm, to deliver more enthusiasm, it's much like asking somebody to change their attitude or to explore attitude. Attitude and our versions of enthusiasm are our observation of someone else's behavior, and then we inference it. We put a label on it. So you may have a good attitude based on your behavior, and somebody else watching the same behavior says, "Oh, you have a bad attitude." Maybe you're outspoken. Maybe you're outspoken. You want your idea to be heard. One person says, "Great attitude, way to charge in there and challenge." Another person says, "Well, that person's a real troublemaker." Yeah. So be careful. Enthusiasm and attitude. I think it's always good to fundamentally begin by, well, what's the behavior that we're looking for, and what does this actually look like, right? So what is our definition of enthusiasm? Pinakin, Scott, what have you got? What are your thoughts on this one?
I
can go ahead and I'll follow your lead.
No, thank you. I guess first thought, what level am I trying to attack this problem, right? Am I attacking it as a CEO, or am I attacking it as a program manager that's responsible for hiring the specific team? We'll take it as a PM that's responsible for hiring the team, right? I think ultimately,
a PM being a program or project
manager or project manager. I'm sorry.
Thanks,
yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And if I'm responsible for motivating somebody, right? Again, I'm meeting them where they are. And one, I understand that I'm a nonprofit and that I may have budget constraints from a dollars perspective. So the dollars probably would be my last answer. And knowing that the person really came on because there's some alignment to their personal side to my mission. Hopefully there's some of that behind the dollars as well. So I would look to tap into that and see if I can find some relations of the work that I'm asking them to do with that piece of that personal alignment they may have to the mission themselves. And then second, there's various rewards that could happen, right? That we could do. Whether it's acknowledgement within the public setting, sometimes goes more than the dollars themselves. Whether you get the team together and say, hey, just because this person's done such a good job, we're going to take the whole team out on lunch or whatever that reward may be. But yeah, there's various ways to, I would say, motivate outside of dollars, especially in the nonprofit side. As a CEO, I've got to make sure that I'm aligning and communicating my brand appropriately so that we're hiring the right types of folks that are aligning to the organization, so we're not getting to some of this misalignment as people are coming in within the firm. But yeah, quick answers, but again, a lot harder to go through it. Scott?
Yeah, these are some really
great. If I could break in, we do have a follow-on from the same person. So just as I lose my voice. How do you align new, younger employees to adhere to important safety rules and work ethics and hopefully retain them as workers? We need to move the needle on a spirit of cooperation to report identified hazards without people feeling they might be in trouble.
Let me take his first question and then leapfrog into the second one. So with respect to Pinakin, a couple of things come to mind. I also don't think financial incentives can be used, but they have to be very carefully applied. And they can go so wrong so many different ways. Hey, how come I'm not getting that money? I do more than he does, So I agree with that piece. There is a question, though, at the heart of it, and this is about alignment, which is you have companies like SpaceX. You go to SpaceX, better not think you're going to be working a 40-hour week. You're going to be working 80 hours. And if you don't want to work 80 hours, don't come to SpaceX. And it sounds like the organization Michael's talking about has a little bit of, here's the deal. If you come here, we're doing good for society, and we expect you to be working 50 or 60 hours because that's kind of the organization we are. And so if you have alignment within the company that that's the deal, and you have somebody that only works 40 hours, well, there's misalignment. But there's also misalignment if the company's pitched as, well, this is a 40-hour work week, but actually the only ones that really get rewarded are the ones that work 60 hours. It's kind of like I don't know.
The informal rules are at play.
Yeah, it's like unlimited PTO. I love that. Well, we've got unlimited PTO, but just notice we will only hire people that don't want to take vacations. That's the way we do unlimited PTO. I digress a little bit, but it highly misaligned with what you are and what you say. And it also raises the question of, is this guy in this 40 hours, is he performing? I mean, what is his performance compared to the other people? Because if you've got somebody that's performing less, well, you got a different problem. So, and also on the acknowledgement piece, boy, have I found that if you do something personal one-to-one with somebody that acknowledges them and really calls out what it is that's unique about what they are. Edgar, you don't really fully realize this, but it's the fact that you listen is the reason you're so extraordinary in what you do. Calling that thing out that you noticed is a pretty powerful way of acknowledging people. Does that get him to work an extra 10 hours a week? I'm not so sure. Anyways, those are kind of a couple of my thoughts there. And maybe I'll send it over to.
And the second part of the question then is, so there's rules or requirements, right, of someone's position job, and the safety of the hazard and the recognition. I'd like to expand on that thought, because that applies to any organization in any industry. There's specific guidelines, there's specific requirements that people have. And in that construct, what are they, and how important they are, and how do you manage that performance? And I think I'd like to go back to something you started queuing in on. Who's ever got that? Thank you. You thanks for getting rid of that echo for us. You've got to be able to have that kind of conversation with people in a very honest way, in a forthright way, to have that level of trust that people respond to. And I think there's something else in what you said, Scott, that's overarching, which is really important, is as you attract, if your employee success strategy, right, you've always got attraction, you got onboarding and the experience itself and retention and these different ways of strategically looking at this. But at the front end, it's not just a clarity of mission. It's also a clarity of what does life here look like. We just can't use the words of culture. We have to describe what the behaviors are, or we have to describe what the actual context is that people are working in. I think that's so important. And I think for me, that also then includes going to that second part of that question is, if people aren't adhering to certain standards that are requirements of the work, then the only really good way to start that conversation is by confronting it and being curious. What's missing? What's not happening for you, right? To come at it with curiosity. Thank you. Pinakin, please.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it right on the head again, right? I think saying, the first piece on it again, whether it's a team or a company, not addressing the cultural aspects of things and not really putting those behaviors into words early on, attracts the wrong types of folks, and then we continue to manage and do performance management incorrectly as well, right from the get-go, if you don't address some of those cultural shifts and putting again those words, the behaviors you'd like to be described into words, for sure.
Heather, do you have another one? Or
to Michael, to his other question,
thank you.
You've got to make it almost celebrated when people point out things that are issues. Hey, a safety issue. We kind of swung the pendulum by celebrating this because we're in a space company. You can't afford to make mistakes that go unnoticed, or an astronaut can get killed. And so we actually swung the pendulum into something we called best efforts and blunders, where we would celebrate and have the company vote on who made the biggest, and in this case, who had the biggest safety infraction this month. And people would compete. They'd say, no, 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 no. When I dropped that flask of ether on the ground, that was the worst one. That's better than what he did with the fire extinguisher. And then we would vote on who had the worst blunder. And it was kind of a joke, except that then at the end of the year, we'd pick a name out of a hat and have like a bed and breakfast weekend for him and his wife, for her and her husband. Clearly within this context was it wasn't okay to continue to make mistakes, but it was something that it was appreciated and honored because we all make mistakes when you surface those. And that created a culture where people were very careful about not making mistakes, but also ashamed of them when they did. That was maybe the power of it.
Yeah, because so often we learn this ever since we're little children, that whole idea of the shame that goes with embarrassment and humiliation for not being good enough, failing.
Yeah. Imposter syndrome again.
And Scotty, you know, and it seems like it aligns exactly to the organization you are, right? That you're trying to create. That again, to go back to what Edgar was saying earlier, it gives the space to create innovations, right? Because if you're open to failures, you're open to some mistakes, you're open to some of these things, allows folks to take some additional risks, right? And bring those innovations in. And hey, this blunder actually allows us to fix XYZ as well. And no, that's a great mindset.
My excitement's coming from you just need a really cool connection between you need to be able to be okay to take risks, to innovate, to have a silly idea that didn't work out. And maybe that same culture is the same one you need to be able to identify the mistakes you make when you do make them. And maybe those go hand in hand. That
for us they do, right? For us that's the growth mindset that we've tried to implement. No, for sure.
Mistakes happen, you know. Mistakes are okay.
It's part of our core value. It's a behavior of our core value under innovation, right? Take risks. Failures are fine. It's one of our guiding principles.
And I can easily question that too, and in a way with intention to be helpful in this is to also keep in mind how important it is to not say it, actually do it, and how much reinforcement and role modeling from leaders, starting with the two of you in your organizations, right? How important it is to be able to do that and be able to be open to recognizing our own mistakes and invite others to that same place. Not easy to do, especially for leaders. And so the role modeling, yes, the two of you are capable of doing that. I have no doubt about that because I've actually observed that. The thing about it is cascading that down through the organization is what culture is all about. So the reinforcement and the role modeling, your reputation as leaders cascades down through the organization, especially when it comes to how people manage mistakes and failures. Because they become so many people quiet quitting, disengagement, et cetera, is because they've gotten feedback in a way that doesn't allow them to really truly be themselves anymore. And when that gap occurs, that's we can talk all we want about engagement. If there's not that kind of connectivity, then we'll all be failing at it. Heather, what else you got? Great guys. You guys are.
One more question.
I'm so happy you're with us here today. Scotty.
Pinakin, I think I know the answer to this, but did you ever share with your company mistakes that you had made? You know, little mea culpa?
You know, with my leadership team, I have on the all hands and some of our parties and things like that. I allow myself to be very, very free in myself, very much so. So I think the team understands where I'm coming from, but not major mistakes with the entire team. I would say with my leadership team, my executive team, we have. You know, I think in our organization, some of the mistakes that happen at the project level or at each individual client site, we try to bring those up and bubble those up and share those amongst the team. But me personally, my personal mistakes, I can't say I've shared with the entire company. That's a good one though. I'm going to take that on. We've got all hands coming up
I
next
challenge
week.
you.
We've got one coming
I
up next
challenge
week.
I hear opportunity
Challenge
knocking.
taken. Yeah, and I love
A little.
opportunities. I love opportunities. That's a good one.
The reason
Scott.
I bring that up is a fairly good friend of mine, a guy named Art Stevenson, became the director of the Marshall Space Flight Center. And we met shortly after he did. And he, all of a sudden he's in charge of 10,000 people. So the best thing that happened is I screwed up, big screw up within the first month. I made a policy change that was wrong. It gave me a chance to get up in front of 5,000 people and say, I did the wrong thing. I'm going to make it right. It's the best leadership moment he ever had, because it galvanized this group into, this is the kind of person we're dealing with. Yeah. And that stuck with me, that vulnerability.
That role modeling of, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What do you got for us, Heather?
Alrighty. In a rapidly growing company with lots of staff transition, how do you build a continuous and deepening employee experience that starts at day one? What's the right level of investment to make when we don't always control their employees' career longevity?
Sounds like my firm, Edgar.
Say more about that.
I think for where we operate within the government spaces, right? So in the federal government space, Social Security Administration is one of our biggest clients. At the same time, where it's a lot customer facing activity. The other big client for us is an Intel client, where it's a little bit more close held, and that customer, in essence, is very much of a different than somebody that's getting Social Security benefits at the end of it, right? That are getting the services on the Intel side.
The actual consumer of what you're creating as a provider.
Exactly, right? So if I try to take on a culture of both of those organizations, which we tried very much so early on, right? Hey, we're going to be everything to everybody. Very, very tough to do. Very tough to do. So then we went back, as you know, and aligned ourselves to what's our brand promise. From there, we started building, okay, what do customers want to know us as? How do we market ourselves? How do employees feel? And what are some of those traits the employees possess? So on and so forth, right? That allowed us to say, okay, here's who we are as a core, and not worry about some of the external things that we may take on within the organization, which allows us to bring on the folks that align to our brand, right? And for us, it's the growth mindset types of folks that have those types of traits, or folks that can do human to human business, right? But yeah, and we also noticed that at our client at Social Security Administration as well, they went through some leadership changes recently, and a new somebody new's come in to administrate the organization themselves. And previously they were in a little bit of flux because they had some leaders that weren't as engaged, because they were only in there as a term, right, rather than a permanent placement. So a lot of those changes and shifts, you start seeing the organization not being able to deliver on their promises because of that, right? So I think, one, go back to you as an organization. What is your brand? Who are you aligning to? And then build from within. But yeah, if you try to take on rather each customer, it'll get very, very tough. So, start with your brand, and then attract the customers that you're looking for.
Yeah. A couple of great pieces in that. One is make sure that you're attracting the right customer. Not all revenue is good revenue. Yeah. Not all growth is sound growth, right? Or aligned growth. Because that's part of it. And also the importance of coming back to the core of who you are as an organization, and the brand and what you represent. And then, of course, aligning the employee experience to the CX. We call that total experience. CX to alignment to TX, EX. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. Scotty?
To the last point you just made, one of the big mistakes I made was as entrepreneurs, revenue growth is like, it's like heroin. It's, oh my gosh, I can grow 100% next year. Why wouldn't I want to? And it comes from a couple masters. One is ego. We're CEOs. Hey, I'm in charge of a $50 million company now. It also comes from financial return. Your company's worth twice as much. But oh my gosh, does that muck with at least in our company, what was really important was a company with aligned values that cared for each other, that loved what we were doing, that was making good money, but we weren't greedy. And as soon as I started getting on the heroin, we were just taking on any growth. This is to your point, we were taking on any customer because it was additional revenue. And the best thing I could have done would have been say, we're going to dial our growth down to 20%. And we're only going to work with the customers we want to work with the margins that we enjoy, and on the products we enjoy. And that would have created a very different company for me rather than just grow. Growth.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Now, you hit on something that is very subtle, yet if you look, it becomes obvious, and that's the cascading of ego. In other words, if you're protective at the top of the organization, every organization in some form or another, we know because we work with different structures across all industries, we've seen a lot over the past 3+ decades of doing this work. And one of the pieces of it is that whatever is happening there, it's kind of like the old expression, the CEOs or the leaders' issues become the issues of the team of the organization, right? Their challenges, their problems, right? Their dysfunction. Well, what you like. It cascades. And this ego piece, I think you hit on is so important, because if you're behaving that way as a leader at the top of the organization, for those here on the webinar that are listening, that are leaders further down in the structure of the organization, the natural hierarchy, to keep in mind that behavior is easily replicable. People look at the definition of success. A culture is how we define how we get success individually, collectively. That gives meaning to our values and beliefs. Here's what success looks like. And people replicate those behaviors. So when that ego part of it comes into play and you cascade that, then it's actually you're not just replicating, you're building that problem and that weak ego, that drive. So I think you hit on something that's really, really important there, to be able to recognize that and be able to see it, and what leaders throughout the organization, what kind of influence they have through that. And nobody wants to work with somebody that has a crappy ego. The old expression, nobody wants to work with an asshole. It's kind of okay,
But we've all seen or been in organizations where that cascades down, and it's like, oh great, I got to deal with this kind of, whatever pride, ego, whatever it is, and oh geez, it runs rampant.
It's kind of fun to look at it, isn't it?
Yeah, Pinakin, what's your take on that? I'm still mulling that over in my head, because I think it's a really important point that Edgar's bringing
I
up.
was wondering that too, because I kind of see you chuckling there.
Yeah, my thought is on being able to take in change, right? If you're able to adopt change as a person, I think that allows your ego to be in check constantly. And that's taking on other people's point of views, taking on other aspects of ways of looking at things, right? But I think, it's what'll kill us if we're constantly not open to new ideas, right? One of the big things that we pushed out within our organization, a little shameless plug here for a partner, Edgar, Holly Chasen, and her team has developed a way to do design thinking that I thought was phenomenal for our organization. We took that and we adopted that within the entire company, and not because it's the way to do empathetic listening and help service our customers and all those things. Yes, absolutely, but more importantly, like that empathetic listening piece, to me, checks your ego. Are you really listening from a place of neutrality? Are you taking on opportunities, right? So tying some of those things in is what I mean by, like, opening yourselves up for other ideas. But I think as an organization, you have to sort of make some of those decisions of, hey, this is the way we're going to operate, and go from there.
Really great. That's a great point, Pinakin. And thanks for bringing in the design thinking and innovation process as a whole. I mean, most people disengage almost immediately when they don't feel like they're going to be heard, which is always one of the top 3 things that employees in all the surveys year after year, whether it be Harvard or Northwest, who is ever doing a survey comes back, and the top, 3 or 4 things that employees want is simply to feel in on things, to be heard, to be a part of. And then we wonder why disengagement occurs.
Yeah.
Because we're not creating the engagement. So design thinking, listening, empathetic, it's not just a really important business and interpersonal personal skill set that you're giving someone.
Yeah.
You're also creating process for engagement. And in our study for the book Innovation by Design, absolutely.
Okay.
They all had some process, much like what you've adopted. The idea of we're going to have a process throughout the organization that engages people,
That's
that
right.
engages their curiosity, their ideas,
Yeah.
and they feel like they're being heard. Not only do they feel like it, because they are being heard.
That's right.
What I like about what you're speaking to, Edgar, is some solutions are very complex. Do these 17 things in the right order, and things will work out. But what you're speaking to is, if you are truly an empathetic listener, you listen and you act on what you hear. I mean, you can be empathetic, and then
That's
things,
true.
and
Taking the right
this
action.
is huge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially if there's 3 things. So empathetic listening, act on what you hear, and have that listening be throughout the organization. So somebody at the front desk, you listen to with as much intent as somebody that's your VP, and you act on those things with as much intent. And even the little things you might do here, somebody at the front desk says, if we changed out our chairs in the front desk, people would really, appreciate it. If you act on those things, my gosh, those 3 things, empathetic listening, acting on them, even the small things, maybe even mostly the small things, and throughout the organization, boy, does that cover a lot of ground.
And Scotty,
Sure
to
does.
piggyback on that, acting on guiding principles, or acting on
Yes.
core
Yeah.
competencies, acting on a set of behaviors that
Yes. Yeah.
that start becoming the culture of the organization itself. No, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, that reminds me of something that just happens to be here. We went through this extraordinary, excruciating process of creating values for the company. And we created these cards. Everybody in the company had to vote on every word of every value. It was excruciating. Boy, did we own it. But I remember a guy stopping me in the hallway and saying, "Hey, we're starting to get into military work. Is that consistent with our values?" And this was a guy that was kind of like, really edgy, and everybody looked at him. And we both pulled out this card and we read through it in the hallway. I went, "Nothing in here conflicts with military." He said, "Yeah, I guess so. All right, I'm good with it." And it kind of embodied all that all at once.
That's interesting. That's powerful, because it goes back to the idea of, what's the employee handbook, the one sentence employee handbook, please our customer, whatever it happens to be. And both, and the expansiveness of that, because so many people come at decision making through what are the boundaries as opposed to what are the opportunities.
Yes.
And I do, and I see this generationally too. I mean, one of the things that we've learned over and over in culture work that we get to do is that if your culture is well defined, it's well articulated and well understood, and people get it, it comes across all generations. It's much like in Pinakin, your world, engaging in a design thinking process invites people across all generations to participate. You're welcoming everyone to be engaged. Yeah. Hey, Heather, we've got a little bit more time. What do you got for us?
Yep. So this one is a great and interesting, very tactical question that I'm curious to hear you guys explore. How do you retain minority workers, primarily Hispanic, in entry-level jobs without compromising their cultural values? They want to work hard. So here's the key. They want to work hard, but do not want to be singled out either for public celebration or corrective action.
Interesting. Ooh, that's a good one. Meaning there's not an easy answer to that.
Yeah, cultural differences are something you have to just embrace. Yeah, no, you're right. There's not an easy answer to cultural differences.
A couple things come to just as a starting place for that is, and this might not be, current thinking, but I think it really is important to acknowledge cultural differences and not just treat, we're all the same. Well, no, we aren't. And that's culturally, ethically, religiously, otherwise. And there really needs to be an honoring, you know,
Mhm.
so, I mean, what a great awareness that I've got a cultural piece here that I want to work and I care about. Oh my gosh, that he cares or she cares that level. That says a lot.
Yeah, just as much to generational for any group for that matter,
Yeah,
for any culture, for any individual as well as collective way
yeah,
of being, right? We're talking about way of being. I
yeah,
think there's a note in chat too from Ken Sagendorf. Empathetic, vulnerable listening. Empathy is to listen through the lens of another to understand them. Yeah,
yeah,
vulnerability allows that empathetic listening to turn into an exploration of responsibility of the person listening, and I think that just hits it on the nail head. Because when we think about individual and collective culture and belief systems, right? I think it goes back to that idea of how we empathetically listen, because that's the origin of mutual respect. And we talk about this in our work with coaches and consultants all the time. We speak to this idea of the empathetic listening and all of these great skills that we teach and learn are really at the end of the day about establishing trust in mutual respect. And mutual respect is simply defined as it's beyond the golden rule. It's I will treat you the way that you expect or want to be treated.
yes,
And
yes,
in reciprocity, you treat me the way I want to be treated. And that cannot happen until we listen to one another, and we do that with great empathy. I think what you're saying is right at the heart of it, and that is to be able to begin with that simple idea of I've got to begin with asking, with inquiring, with being open and listening, because only then are we going to be able to collaborate to find solutions to issues, to problems, or let alone new ideas and new ways of functioning and operating in organizations. And again, engagement. I don't. If you're not going to listen to me, I'm not going to bother being open with you. I'm not even going to bother telling you what I think, see, or feel. It's not going to happen. Let alone is I'm not going to perform for you the same way either. It's we're back to human nature.
The other thing I would warn against, Edgar, as well, right? Some of those cultural norms, just
Yes.
they're not norms often
yeah,
either, right? So I would double check and triple check and
yeah.
make sure,
Very good
right?
point.
You're talking to
Very
the
good point.
individual and not a whole group, right? And you're not singling individuals
Yes.
out within a group as well. I think there's that, gone too far, that obviously can happen very, very quickly. And
Yeah.
then you start getting groups within the organization, which is not your intention because you're trying to service somebody and meet them where they are. So,
Yeah.
just very, very careful. That's why it's so difficult to do. But yeah.
Speaking tactically to the question, I found it remarkable the power of handwritten notes, particularly now. And I got in the habit with the company of, we couldn't celebrate his birthday, but HR would tell me whose birthday it was, and I'd take 10 minutes to write a note that was, here's what I've particularly appreciated about working with you. Here's the 3 or 4 things that stand out. And if we, like for instance, in this case, we take the time to write a personal note, but more importantly, we really go to what is unique about that person. What do they bring? And what often happens is the things that you're bringing down there are things they might not even know. And if you can manage to pull out and lift them up and let them know they're even a cooler person than they thought they were, oh man, that just rocks. It just rocks all over the place. Hey, I didn't even know you noticed that, and I didn't notice that in myself. Thank you. It kind of ties into a lot of what we're talking about.
It does. And yeah, because at the end of the day, whether it's individual or collective engagement, it's about recognizing people. It begins with that. It does.
Yeah, recognizing people. Yeah, this part of them.
The hard part.
The hard part. The hard part.
Yeah, the caring. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And which is often the soft skill that we realize at the end of the day in our relationships to one another become the hardest skills, right? Always a play on that one.
Vulnerability.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah. So if there's a one or two word response to this last hour, because we're coming to a close for the webinar, a 1 to 2 word response, and some of you out there, if you want to drop one in the chat, please do so. The
Yeah.
Drop it in there. What in one or two, maybe three words? What's a final thought that you want to impart on everyone that's joined us here today?
So is that chat input or
no for you? Just no for
Oh.
you. You're one of the two guests. You get to respond.
Well, I mean, the two words that really drove home things for me is the idea of the intentional, empathetic listening. Edgar, you had a great phrase for it. That's how I heard it. But what was the phrase you used? But it was about the empathetic, intentional listening, and the idea
importance of it.
The importance, and if there's one thing, if there's one thing to do right, that covers a lot of ground.
Yeah, agreed.
That's been one point that's really stuck with me, a reminder of that, or a learning in that area.
Yeah, it seems like all of our relationships begin with at the end of the day with listening with intention to understand. Yeah.
Yep.
Pinakin?
For me, Edgar, I think what I learned, or what I'll take back, when I think I'm being vulnerable, I'm probably not being vulnerable enough. So really think through that as a CEO, right? Again, going back to the fact that I probably need to open up to the entire company about some mistakes or some ways to kind of get better. If that's what we're embracing as a growth mindset. So yeah, for me, I personally learned a lot here as well. Thank you.
Yeah. So we've got the hard part is the hard part. Great to see the mind shift where vulnerability is welcomed as opposed to be seen as negative. Scotty, to hear more about Starsis and the company from Garage to Mars, a memoir of a space entrepreneur, thank you. Excellent. Yeah. Great read, folks. Very entertaining, as you are, Scott, always, and really bright and insightful. Thank you, Pinakin. Thank you, all of you out there that tuned in for today's webinar. Let other people know it'll be up and available very shortly here today on YouTube. Thanks for sharing your experiences with us, Scott, Pinakin. Everybody else, I hope you're feeling energized and you got some new perspectives. Remember this, that the conversation of business is alignment. The journey to alignment is ongoing. And of course, like everything in life, including seeing ourselves and looking ourselves in the mirror, the power of alignment can never be understated. It's what life is really all about. And so stay connected to us. Urge you to visit our website. You can email us at info@truealignment.com with all your questions. Like we always say in the podcast, we're happy to hear from you. We'll get back as quickly as we can. And until the end of June and the next Quantum Alignment webinar, keep aligning, live well and live aligned. And thank you all for joining us today. Have a great day. Have a great week. Thank you.
Have a great afternoon. Thank you, Edgar. Scott.
Thank you very, very much. I don't know if you're still recording that. It's kind of fun to watch the names drop, and we still are getting some great stuff in on the chat. So thank you to everyone who's plugged in some compliments and some thank yous in reciprocity. Thank you very, very much. It's been great having you with us. All right, all. We'll sign off here. Thank you.